Class, it's Professor Baker here. I'm going to talk to you real quick about general strain theory, and I'm going to use a case study example using Timothy McVeigh, who was the what's referred to as a domestic terrorist, responsible individual for the 1995 bombing of the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. To start with, just to kind of reiterate or repeat some of the things you may have learned about the general strain theory, I actually have to back up a little bit and discuss quickly the traditional strain theory. So there's a couple of different theorists involved. First is Robert Merton, who came up with the traditional, or is credited for the traditional strain theory. It's pretty easy to understand the traditional strain theory. You have a goal, and according to Merton, if you failed to achieve that goal, you rebounded, and this was considered the strain. If you tried to accomplish that goal through legitimate means and you failed, you experienced strain. The result of strain is that you would then turn to crime to commit or to achieve those same goals. This is going from a legitimate way to achieve the goals. You fail, strain, you rebound into crime as a method to achieve those goals. So it's an either-or type of relationship. With the general strain theory, there's another factor in here. There's goals, and then there's an accepted level of achievement. So we may want to become something we would accept if we only became this, or we want to achieve this monetary goal, we would be satisfied if we achieved this. And what actually happens is the person experiences strain not so much if they don't hit their goal, but even if they don't hit this middle mark, what they would believe to be their accepted or expected outcome. That's where the strain results. If they don't meet their accepted or their anticipated result. From here, the idea does not transition directly into crime to achieve a goal, but there's several other factors. Involved. Those factors include the loss of positive stimuli, the introduction of negative stimuli. Also, in Robert Agnew's version of the general strain theory, there was this idea of coping skills. The idea of coping skills could be compared very much to Merton's idea of personality adaptations, like ritualist, innovator, rebel, so on. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to clear the board. I'm going to talk a little bit about Timothy McVeigh. Okay, class, I'm going to use the example of Timothy McVeigh with the 1995 bombing of the federal building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. To start with, we wanted to identify or talk a little bit about what was Timothy McVeigh's strain and how does he fit into the general strain theory. Timothy McVeigh was born in 1968, and his grandfather was one of the biggest influences in his life. His patriotic person. They enjoyed talking about history and about military. Timothy McVeigh really looked up to his grandfather and regarded him as a hero. The grandfather also introduced Tim McVeigh into weapons and shooting as a sport, rifles, handguns, hunting, and so on. And from what we have learned a little bit about Timothy McVeigh, it was this influence of his grandfather that led him to the ambition to be in the U.S. military, and he wanted to be in the Special Forces. Special Forces, this would have been his goal. This would have been the top tier that he wanted to achieve. When he went to the first Gulf War, when the U.S. went in with Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and some of the other allied nations and drove the Iraqi army out of Kuwait, Timothy McVeigh had an opportunity to be in that war and to witness something that he determined was reprehensible and kind of destroyed his positive image of the United States. In that particular circumstance, the U.S. forces pursued the Iraqi army up the highway towards Baghdad. It was basically a highway or a funnel in the middle of the desert, and they really destroyed the Iraqi army, and they devastated them with artillery, with aircraft, and with infantry to follow up on that. It was a real devastating blow of an army retreat. To Timothy McVeigh, this presented a kind of a bullyish behavior or an unfair treatment, kind of tainted his image of the U.S. government. Some people say it was because Tim McVeigh washed out of the Special Forces training that he ended up becoming a bomber. The story is a little bit more in depth if we use the general strain theory to analyze it. He at least wanted to have a career in the Army. This would have been his acceptable outcome or his mid-level expectation. But when he left the Army, disillusioned, questioning his patriotism, again, kind of going against many of the ideals that his grandfather taught him, this is when he experienced a strain. All right? So his rebound, though, is not automatically into crime because his goal is special forces, but he has this ideology that goes with the special forces. So there's several things that happen along the way that lead him to this event. First of all, we talk about loss of positive stimuli and introduction of negative stimuli. His grandfather died. This was a very important relationship in his life, so the loss is actually a loss in a relationship. Think about sociology. Sociology deals with people and with places and with maybe your prospects as far as economics and future earnings, future opportunity. He lost a relationship that was key and critical to him. In that same time frame, he met some people that he had encountered through the military service and who had a counterculture or a subculture type of view on the United States. These were the Nichols brothers. And so the addition of negative stimuli, the loss of positive stimuli, the addition of negative stimuli was the Nichols brothers, and these guys, their opinion and their ideology against the United States. One of the big things that was a driving point that was negative to the Nichols, and Tim McVeigh was also part of this, was a few years earlier the U.S. government had taken a police action in Waco, Texas. These guys were fringe observers of that police action, and they compared, at least Tim McVeigh was part of that comparison of what the U.S. government did in Waco, Texas to what he observed in the Iraqi Army's retreat, and he saw that excessive use of force as another brutal step taken by the U.S. government, again disillusioning his patriotism. Loss of positive stimuli, loss of the grandfather, addition of negative stimuli being this friendship with these brothers who were also part of a fringe, wouldn't want to call them a terrorist organization immediately because not all groups that think like these guys are terrorists, but these guys were willing to take it to the next step, and they built a large truck bomb to place in front of the Murrah Federal Building. There was about 160 some people that were killed, at least 600 injured. The second floor of the Federal Building was a daycare center. There was a lot of loss of life. The idea that is right in this stage here has to do with coping skills, and if we compare that to Merton's modes of personality adaptation, you might say that Timothy McVeigh and his friends, when they made the decision to create that truck bomb and to blow up this building, that they were maybe fitting into a rebellious, obviously, or some kind of a innovator or an action step that was obviously not just tolerating or accepting the strain, but actually taking steps to redefine or to butt against it or to antagonize that strain that he has experienced. I don't use the strain or the motivations of the Nichols brothers in this comparison. I try to stay focused on one person. The neatest parts about the general strain theory is how you can apply the general strain theory to people of all different classes, socioeconomic classes, and you can apply this to violent crimes, a wide range of crimes as opposed to property offenses. The traditional Merton strain theory, the traditional strain theory focuses mostly on why poor people experience strain and then turn to property crimes as a means to achieve goals. Those goals are mostly financial success. In the case of the goals of bombing the Murrah Federal Building, was not to destabilize the United States. It was meant mostly as a strike or an anger or retaliation type of motive against the United States. And again, how this story ends, Timothy McVeigh and the ideology of the Nichols brothers, they didn't believe that the government, the U.S. government, had the right to register or control property or the lives of other human beings. And so their ideology was basically that they only answered to God, even though they didn't really have that traditional relationship with God that we may, you may think of in the secular traditional type senses. He was caught driving north out of Oklahoma in a vehicle with no license plate, obviously attracted the attention of the police. Police pulled him over. He had an unlicensed or handgun with him that he wasn't properly licensed to carry. They detained him for about 24 hours and were ready to let him go, when all of a sudden they realized through the NCIC computer system and through the FBI warrant system that he was a person of interest in this federal building bombing. In 2001, he was given the death penalty. He died without any remorse for what he had done. And the loss of life was severe, obviously deserving of that type of retribution, that type of punishment for the act that he had committed. This is my analysis, just a very basic kind of field interpretation of one major mass murder case to the general strain theory. It could be used in a case of a singular homicide. It could be used in many different cases as well. So this is Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing. Thanks.